Hi, I'm acting teacher Michael Bean. This is your free lesson for Monday, March the 7th for myfreeactingclass.com. I've been teaching film and TV acting professionally for the last 20 years. Whoa. And I've been running these lessons since the very beginning of the pandemic. So I guess that's just a smidge more than 2 solid years now, which yikes. And today we're going to be covering self-tape review, talking about how to do a professional self-tape. Most of you probably already know, but here it is again. Almost all auditions now are auditions that you record at home. It used to be that you needed an entire skill set that involves sort of how to manage the anxiety and what to do when you walked into a real professional audition room. Certainly that still is a useful skill set, but will be mostly necessary for your like second or third or fourth auditions, because that's when you're going to be doing something in person. Right now, almost all auditions, very, very, very high percentage of them are self-tapes. And because that is more convenient for casting, and it means that they can see more people than they would otherwise, I just do not see it going back. And when I've talked to professional casting directors, they say, yeah, the quality of the tapes is about equivalent in terms of like people coming in the room, in which some people thrive in that in the room environment, right? Just like some people are like they get under pressure and it just like laser focuses them and they light up. But just as many people under that amount of pressure sort of like get crunchy or stiff or weird. And so I'm sure that they lose some tapes, for self tapes, but they definitely lost some tapes in person. So and it lets them see more people and zip through them faster. So that's the reality. And that's one of the reasons why the focus here is on what do you do for a self-tape? What does professional acting look like in that context? And if you have questions as we go, feel free to jump in. So a little bit of context for the project, myfreeactingclass.com. Here it is. There's the website. You should get this little pop-up that is to sign up for the newsletter, the mailing list. If you do that, then I will send you an email just about every week. I'm pretty consistent with a link to the video and sometimes additional resources as they come my way. Click here for today's lesson. That'll take you to me. If you have self-tape, send them to info@myfreeactingclass.com. Just click this button. And if you want to see video from past lessons, you can go into the video archive here. Separated into decision makers, guests, acting, self-tapes. I've not updated this in 3 or 4 months. So if you wanted to see the most recent few months of videos, you would need to go to the YouTube channel, which should take you right here. All of these lessons here. Now, let's get into self-tape review today. One of the things that has been exciting for me in the pandemic is to start running classes that are mixed age. Truly, as an acting teacher, I got my start with teens, and then I added working with young children, and then I added working with adults. And I think that the basic skills of acting translate across. And I found for myself that adding language for each different population helped me as an actor, helped me as a teacher. And so one of the things that has been really enjoyable is to work with young people, to work with teens, and to work with adults, and to sort of include those in the same space. Doesn't mean that I don't drop as many F-bombs as I do sometimes when I'm teaching adults, but I think that the real deal is the real deal, and it doesn't matter if you're 10, or 17 or 70. That the real deal is still the real deal, and it's possible to offer that professional training. So one of the tapes that we're going to watch is from somebody who's far away, and this is exactly my hope for the My Free Acting class. I'm trying to remember what country she said her and her sister are in. Maybe they did not say. And so this is from a 10-year-old girl, whose older sister found the lessons online and recorded this tape for us. And then we're going to see a tape from Duke and from Natalya, who's a longtime contributor. And with any of those tapes, we can go and look at the script for a little bit more detail. So maybe we'll do that with the first one even, so then we can have that frame for the rest of them. Something that I sometimes remember to cover in detail, but I don't always. And so it's useful, I think, as a reminder over and over and over again, just so you're like, oh yeah, I know that works, right? It's really straightforward, is that 5-step process of casting, which is that at the very top of the actors food chain is the producer's in charge of the project because they're in charge of the money. They make final decisions about casting. They hire everybody, including the director's in charge of the story. right? They're overseeing the storyboards. They're the person who's saying action and cut. They're directing the actors. They often have influence on casting, but they don't necessarily decide. Casting directors, this is the important choke point for anybody with professional film and TV career in mind. They're the one who decides who gets to audition, and they run the auditions, but they do not decide who gets cast. Very, very common mistake for professional actors. They think casting directors decide who gets cast. Oh, the casting director cast me. They don't decide. The person who decides, person with the money, or persons. Sometimes there's as many as 11 people. If you're going out for a lead, who might have to agree on you, right? If you've got a role and you're just coming in and saying a line of dialogue, maybe it's just one person who's like, yeah, great, good, go with that person. Maybe this person is like, even like, okay, for this one line, we don't care. You get to decide, casting director. That is the exception, and where this person does get to decide. But mostly they just are the choke point for deciding who gets to audition. Next up on the food chain is the professional talent agent, because there are so many actors all the way over here, so many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands if we go into the American market, or if we extend into the UK, or internationally, hundreds of thousands of people who all would want an audition. Somebody's got to be the in-betweener, and that's the professional talent agent. So marketing professional, their job is to help their actors get auditions, and then help the actors who get those auditions and who book those projects negotiate their contracts with the producers, right? So the talent agent is a professional marketer. They're a representative who represents you first to the casting directors to try and get you the audition, and then to the producers to try and negotiate better rate and details for you. Right, so that's the agent part of things, and they only get paid if you get paid. So they have absolutely no incentive to tell you you're awesome if you're not, because that makes them zero money, and that's what they care about, is living and eating. So if they're like, Alex, you're awesome, we want to sign you up, unless they ask you for money, in which case they're a scam and you should just politely run the other way, or report them to the authorities. If they ask you for money, yeah, it's not a good thing. But if they're like, yeah, you're amazing, and we want to sign you up, and we want to get you jobs, and then you're 6 months in, and they're still telling you you're great, and you're still not getting called in for auditions, that doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong. Because if they've still got you on their roster and they're still putting energy into you, that means they're gambling on you, and they think that you're a good gamble. And so I was saying this to Duke last week. This is an ongoing conversation with agents. If you remember what their job is, which is to help you get auditions, but that they do not decide who gets auditions. They just ask. They're like, Alex is amazing. You want to see him? No? Okay. Alex is amazing. You want to see him? No. Okay. Okay. What about now? What about now? What about now? And they're like potentially doing that like 15 times a day. The real question after 6 months, if the casting directors are not saying yes to you, is, hey, I've noticed casting directors aren't saying yes. Here's what I can think about doing about that. What are your ideas? Like, how do we collaborate? Because I know we both want those casting directors to say yes, so that I can book stuff, so that you can make money and we both can eat. That'll be good for everyone. And that's a way different conversation than the one that I typically hear from newer actors, which is, oh, my talent agent isn't giving me enough auditions, or casting directors aren't booking me for jobs. Both of those statements include a misunderstanding of what that job is. Producer decides, casting director doesn't decide, who gets the job. Casting director decides who gets an audition, not the talent agent. So a little bit about that. Talking about self-tapes. So what I'm doing right now, which is simply just recording this on my laptop. Okay, I have a nice microphone, but here's what it sounds like without my nice microphone. Even this is totally fine for a self-tape. And most people these days are recording self-tapes on their phones. And that for, unless you have an extremely old piece of technology or there's something wrong with it, that the audio quality and the video recording quality on your phone are probably too high to send unedited footage as a self-tape. Like, you're still going to have to use some kind of editing program to make it smaller before sending it. So just if you're like, is my phone good enough? Do I need fancy technology? No, like flat no, hard no. You just need something you can have a stack of books that you prop your thing on. Really spending the like $10 or $15 on a tripod, is probably, like, if you're going to invest in one thing, that's probably the one thing that would be helpful for you, is something to get the phone up to eye level that is adjustable, so that you're just not having to like fuss with it all the time. you want some kind of light that is pointed at your eyeballs and a nice neutral background. So if I can use you all as examples, for instance, Alex's light is fantastic right now. Look at this guy. Okay, right, so he is very well lit. He's got an eye light, right? So there's a shiny light reflected in his eyeballs. He is better lit than his background, so his lighting is great. My guess is that either he's got a big window behind his computer, or he's got a ring light or something pointed right at his eyeballs. Right, this light in your eyeballs, very important for making you look alive on camera. You could also see that his background is distracting, but that's because he didn't know I was going to put him on the spot. Thank you, Alex. And so even simple stuff like furniture, or a bookshelf in the background, definitely important to avoid if you possibly can. Right, and sometimes you're in a hotel room or you're staying with a friend and just like you got to record with what you got. But if you possibly can, get a chunk of blank wall behind you, get a light reflected in your eyeballs, and make sure that your phone is horizontal, which is going to be my first note on the first tape that we're going to watch today, which is that the Arias was recorded vertical, which typically for self-tapes, you will see right in the breakdown. It'll say these days, if you're recording with a phone, make sure it's horizontal, because that's reflective of what they're going to see on television. I think is part of it is they just want it to be simple and to reflect what they're going to see. So eye line, imaginary line between your eyes and what you're looking at, nice and close to camera, just one side or the other. If you're like, how far away should the eye lines be? This came from the parent of a student, and I thought it was a very easy way to tell if you are turned so far that your nose starts to cut off your eyeball. Okay, that's probably too far, because we want to see your full and complete eyeballs. And so I use the corners of my screen, but you want to pick eye lines that are nice and close to the camera and at the same level. Because if I put myself up above the camera, then you're shooting up my nose, then even if my eye lines are close by, then I start to look very strange. And the same thing is true. This will be a little bit harder on my end. But shooting down on myself makes, not only does it make my voluminous forehead look even more voluminous, but also we just get like a strange angle on you, and it looks like you're talking to people who are 9 feet tall. So that's a little bit about eye line. Let's take a look at Aria's tape and go from there.
I have to share? It's only for a few months. A few months? Until we get a place of our own. Why'd we have to leave Illinois? Because Daddy lost his job and ran out of money. Why can't I stay in this room?
Okay, great. So 17 seconds of tape, totally accessible. If you're like, man, I wish I had a practice scene to work on like this. There's an entire lesson that I did a few months ago about where to find practice scenes. And also you can just email me info@myfreeactingclass.com. And the first about 10 people a month who do that, I can just pull something from my archive and send it to you. Right. So that goes for both of you, Alex and Nissy, if you're like, can you send me a practice scene that's like a comedy for a dude in his 20s? Yes, I can definitely do that. All you have to do is email me and ask. Let's take a quick look at this one again for technical things. So right away we can see an eye light. So there's that dot of light reflecting the eyeballs, really important. Like the lighting actually here is actually quite good. The neutral background. One of the consequences of it being vertical and not horizontal is that we can read her shirt. Shirts or anything that's sparkly or has words on it, you typically want to avoid for an audition, because you don't want anybody looking anywhere except your eyeballs, and they can possibly avoid it.
I have to share? It's only for a few months. A few months? Until we get a place of our own. Why'd we have to leave Illinois? Because Daddy lost his job and ran out of money. Why can't I stay in this room?
Now, I will say that eye line, it looks like she's looking directly at the camera. So my guess is that her sister was holding the camera, and directly behind it, and that she was recording. Now, so like I said, sometimes you don't have a tripod. Even if that's the case, and this is for Aria's sister, if you're watching this, just like this, you just want to just hold the camera beside you, and that would make this sort of look better, cleaner, clearer. So that would be my advice for setup, even if you do have to just try and hold it very still. And also, like I said, if you can put on a stack of books or something, and that would give you the option of being slightly further back. So again, because the sister is holding the phone, her mouth is much closer to it, so you can hear that her voice is louder than the actor. And ideally, you want the actor to be louder and closer. Now let's take a quick look at the script, because this is a nice short script, and so it's a good option in terms of like clearly getting a sense of what does what does it look like in terms of like breaking down the script. So this one is from an older project called Vinegar Hill. Amy enters, sees what she feared, one room, two beds. She turns to Ellen, fuming. I have to share. Ellen thankful Mary Margaret has not followed them into the room to hear this. So one of my first thoughts, Arita, and this goes into that first piece of analysis of like, what is the story, is what's called moment before, right? So this is where the actor gets to be creative, and also a close reading of the script is useful and important. That the I think the mistake that folks make is they're like, oh, the script starts when my words start. Yeah, and the risk is that that can make it look technical. And what we want it to look like is you're just a real person in a place doing a thing, and the camera happens to catch you doing it. And of course, there's so much artificial about your setup, right? You are constrained in how much you can move. You've got all this technical setup. But inside of that, once you've got that technical container set, you want to make it seem as much like you're a real person in a place doing a thing as humanly possible. So the moment before Amy enters, sees what she feared, one room, two beds, she turns to Ellen, fuming. We did not get this moment in the script. And in this case, the writer has literally given you the moment before. And instead what happened was, boom, words immediately. And even if the feeling is right for it, even if we believe that feeling, because we didn't get the moment before, there's a sense watching the tape of, oh, we're watching an actor, as opposed to we're watching a person in a place doing a thing. And I talked about this extensively in last week's lesson. If you want to go onto the YouTube channel and see that, where I talked about acting as doing, that behavior is one of the things that is enormously important in terms of conveying emotional information. That we watch the characters' body language and where they're looking and what their face is doing. We watch for all of these little subtle cues that help us, the audience, guess how they're feeling, as opposed to just listening to their words. That's only for a few months, etc., etc. And then there's this cut that's written into the scene. Now, if this was an audition where you needed to cut and restart, typically it would say end here and start here. So you do often, and sometimes they'll have a little arrow that's sort of drawn straight through with something like this. So sometimes you'll look at a script like this and it'll go like this. But in this case, casting did not do that. And so you just have to know for yourself that, oh, this is one continuous scene, which Aria did, and knew. So good on you, Aria. And then let's take a look at the story analysis so that we can just sort of like quickly get those in our head to look at for the rest of them. So story, right? And so these are my 5 right now, and I've been playing with it, trying to condense it down into 5 easy ones, one for each finger, to make it crystal clear and easy for you. And that's story, style, relationships, changes, and want. And so we'll go over those again real quickly, but it's story, style, relationships, changes, and want. And so if we're taking a look at that again, story includes who, what, where, when, why, how, right? This is the careful reading of the script. Highly recommend when you get a script that you read everything out loud. It is just too easy to accidentally overlook a word or two and completely miss the context of the scene, right? I coached a scene once where it said at the very beginning, int hospice day. And a hospice is a place, obviously, where somebody goes to die. You don't need to know what all of this language means, but you have Google at your fingertips, and 5 seconds later, you'll be able to find out what this word means. And if you don't look up that word and you don't know what that word means, obviously, you don't end up telling the right story. Descriptive words for the characters, right? So that's, I'm going to choose 5 words or adjectives to describe myself as the character. Moment before, moment after. And I suppose the moments in between too, the story from your character's perspective. Style is it a TV show? Is it a pilot? Is it comedy? Is it drama? With a relationship, strong feelings or opinions about people, objects, and events. And then there's some info here about how you might go about finding that in your own life or in your imagination. changes, often called arc, right? How's it change? The scene change from the beginning to the end, or beats, very, very common language for it in the world of acting teachers, but it's really just about change. A good story involves change, period. If the character doesn't change at all and there is no change, then likely there's no story and you're not going to engage people with it. And then want, what does your character most want and what are they trying to get the other person to do or feel so they get it? And so if we're going to look at this Vinegar Hill script again, I would say that Aria did a great job of trying to connect to this, as a real person and give us that foundation of this is me saying this as though I really want to say it. And then everything that I would add to it is about fleshing out the story, moment before, moment after, those moments in between. You can see that there's a moment where she probably doesn't even notice that she's making a face, right? She's just sort of doing like a little habitual release of tension, with her mouth in between lines that does not read on camera, at least, as a she's listening and reacting. It reads as a this is an Aria thing, and it doesn't quite fit the character. So noticing physical behavior can be important. There's lots of different stuff you can add. But I would say start with story, right? That's why I put it first on the list. Start with story. So the foundation Aria gave us, which is like, I'm a real person, I'm just talking the way I want to talk, that's the price of entry. I've talked about this before, but I think that is really worth coming back to and back to and back to, is that for professional film and TV acting, we have to believe you're a real person, that this is just what you want to say. It doesn't matter how expressive it is, if it feels false, or it feels to the people watching like you are trying to feel something. The actor can have an experience of like, wow, I'm being so expressive and I'm feeling all the things. Yeah, this feels so good to me. But if it doesn't come across as honest, then honestly, you'd be better off sending something with you just saying the words. And I know that sucks as an artist. Like, you want to be able to send the thing that like involves like you ripping your guts out or feeling the feels. But the foundation is, do we believe you talking? And if you don't meet that basic foundation, then what the stuff that you want to add because it's fun, because it's creatively fulfilling, potentially prioritizes your experience as the artist instead of the experience of the people watching. And you're telling a story for other people. And in film and TV, that means that we have to believe you. That's a moving target, of course. Believable means different things based on the style, right? Believable for a big comedy or Nickelodeon show is going to look different from believable for Game of Thrones, but believable is still the goal, right? That's why style is the second choice on there, because knowing what kind of style you're in helps you adjust. And it's not going to be something you're going to be perfect at. You don't have to be perfect for an audition because they're not paying you, right? You just take your best guess and you show them you're a professional, and ideally they're like, wow, that was really interesting, here's something that we want different about the style or about the interpretation, please do it again for us. Great, you've engaged them and gotten them hungry to see more. This isn't a like, I have to throw a dart and I have to hit the bullseye or else it's a waste. This is I have to throw a dart, and if I get somewhere near the center, and they like what I look like for this part, then they can say, hey, you got somewhere near the center, we see, you know what you're doing, do it again for us like this. And really that's all we can do, is just keep trying to hone that in. Alex asked, I have a self-tape, would be okay to send it right now? Yeah, let's see if we can, Alex. I've got 2 more to review, and if I can review a 4th one before we finish the lesson, I absolutely will for you. That's really fun. Here we go. So let's take a look at Duke's self-tape today.
Wait, AAA is auto insurance? Yes, sir. In fact, we have local experience giving folks the right coverage for what they need. We cover home, too. Of course we can. Let's see with auto insurance from AAA. Wait, AAA has auto insurance? Yes, sir. In fact, we have over 100 years experience giving folks the right coverage for what they need. We cover home, too.
Okay, so let's take a look at the technicalities of it. Yeah, ooh, let's see if we can find a more flattering freeze frame, for Duke. There we go. Very dramatic. What we've got here is neutral background, right, looking sharp, right? The lighting is probably like a little bit too more like above you, and if you can, even if you're just rating your house from desk lamps and continuing to like bring them around and point them at your face, then that might warm you up a little bit, but your setup keeps getting cleaner and your tapes are looking cleaner. So the blank neutral background, your audio is good. Sounds like you're reading with a recording, which you may be, which I think it always makes it sound a little stiffer, but also sometimes you're just not going to have any choice, especially for something like this. I want to put in a plug. I do not have a financial agreement with these folks. I want to put in a plug again for a site called weaudition.com. It is not expensive. I'm putting it in the chat window right now. And it's a place where you can go online, and if you have a whatever $10 a month membership, then you can book people there to read with you, right? So then you can just set up your computer and have somebody read with you on their computer and tape on your phone, if that's available to you, or sort of have somebody read on one device and tape with another device. And there are always folks on there who are students, who are new actors, who are inviting that kind of connection without charging money, right? There are folks who are really experienced actors on there, who are like $7 for 15 minutes, or the sort of rates tend to vary from about like $5 for 15 minutes, up to 10 or 15. But there also are always students on there who will read with you. And if it's between that and reading with yourself on a tape, I think in general you're probably better off getting a real human to read with you. And like with most technical things, the first time you do it, it'll take extra time, you budget extra time, but once you've got it figured out, man, it's just so fast and easy. And there are folks in the UK who are on there, there are folks in Eastern Europe who are on there, there are folks in the Eastern US who are on there. And so I so far have never been on that website where there weren't people available to read. Many of whom are skilled professional actors. So there's my little plug for like getting an easy reader for yourself. Back to Duke's tape. Right, we've got the highlight, he's in the center and like just slightly off center, center or slightly off center, both good. He's louder than the reader. So I think that technically this is in really good shape, Duke. And for a commercial, this is clearly a commercial audition, I would say just that you could play with bigger reactions. So particularly in this first tape, where like I love this, the foundation of like I'm just a normal person, but then when you get to this like a big reaction moment, that potentially that's more of that change or more of that arc. And particularly for commercial, unless they've said specifically in the breakdown, which they may have, if they said in the breakdown really stripped down, really natural, like don't do too much, something, then maybe they asked for that and Duke's giving them exactly what they asked for. But otherwise, I would say that here,
Wait, AAA is auto insurance?
nice, right? So there's change. There's like, well, normal, drinking my coffee. Huh? What? And then you can go, into stronger reaction from that point forward. Right. So that reaction there was they're like, was so subtle that it read to me as a like, oh, whatever, I don't care. And I wonder if that's the most interesting choice, that you could make that still fits the script. And I'd be interested in looking at the script and brainstorming options. But that's just sort of my one thought, is that you would look at the story there, you would look at the script, and then you would use that to help yourself make choices about the change that you want in it. So let's look at Natalya's tape. We got 2 minutes for that. And then Alex, we should be able to get to your tape before the end of the sessions. Then we can talk to you live and in person about it and get your questions about it. Duke, do you have any questions or comments about that tape before I move on?
What if your reader has a really bad accent that slows up the reading?
If you are using a website like weaudition.com, then when that has happened to me in the past, 30 seconds in, I've been like, thank you so much, this isn't going to work. And if I've already committed to pay the money, then I'm like, well, live and learn, and I send them the $7 and I move on and I book somebody else immediately. And if it's somebody who's doing it for free, then I'm like, hey, thank you so much for the time. This doesn't seem like a good fit for me. And then I bounce and I book somebody else, because I want because especially in that context, for an audition, the focus needs to be on you. And if the reader is doing something that's distracting and it's not something they have control over, like it's an accent, or I've had readers who are just very, very slow readers, and it is absolutely possible to be an actor who struggles with reading. I have known very, very skilled actors who are dyslexic, but it takes them more time. And in the context of like, I'm going to give you a script, I need you to read it right now and sound like a real person talking. If somebody can't do that, I'll just be like, thank you so much. This doesn't work for me. Goodbye. And I'll swap them out for somebody else. And I understand that if you're reading with a friend or something, maybe that's not available to you and you're in an awkward position of like sort of needing to spend more like half an hour, like reading the thing, having tea, and then quickly hop on the audition and book somebody, but that's definitely one of those sort of learning processes. So that would be my advice. Anything else? Okay, great. Moving on to look at Natalya. Now, Natalya started submitting tapes, like a year and a half ago. If you were going to go back through the archive, you would see lots of images of her face as she sort of slowly worked through some of these skills and the technical things. I shared that she booked a Marvel TV series, that finished shooting, just a couple of months ago that she can't tell us the name of until it airs. But just like my free acting class success story, and it makes me happy. So here's Natalya. So Natalya is often on the move. I believe that her husband travels for work, and so I have received tapes from her where she's like, I'm in Korea, I'm in Russia, now I'm in the UK. And so often she doesn't have a lot of control over her background. So you can see that she's clearly packing some kind of light with her because she has a light reflected in her eyeballs, and is whether that's a desk lamp that she picked up in the house and taped a white piece of paper over top of, which incidentally helps diffuse the light, and then means it won't be quite as blinding, can make the light quality better if you're working with improvised lights. Or maybe she packs a little ring light around with her, I don't know. But we've got, she's lit from the front, we're getting a little bit of glare on her, that's a little bit unflattering. And like, does that matter in the larger sense? If it's something that you can address, it's probably worth addressing, just because film is so shallow, that, if you can have, I know a lot of actors, particularly actresses, who travel with just like a neutral face powder, and will sometimes like powder in between takes because there's like no shininess, gonna take care of it. Now, I'm a shiny human. Do I think about it for my own tapes? No. So you got to take my advice with a grain of salt. But you can see that at least in this tape, I think just because of the position of the lighting and the fact that it's quite bright, and we're getting some glare. But neutral background, a little bit of wallpaper. I don't think that's an issue. Like, is it better with a blank wall? Yeah. Do you always have that option? No. And her eye line is right beside the camera. Let's take a look at the actual work.
Hi, my name is Natalya, and I am auditioning for Mrs. Borkman's part. Thank you.
Help me hold him.
I will not try to hold you anyone. In all the world. Let him go. Away from them. Both the one and the other. As far as they ever please. Erhard. Erhard, don't leave me. Let me pass, I say. He must not go away from me.
Is that really useless? You will never.
Okay, so that's probably enough to give us a sense of it. Something that I've said in these lessons that I'll keep coming back to is that folks are going to make an assessment of the work typically in the first like 5 to 15 seconds. And one of the reasons that they can see 100 tapes instead of seeing 10 people in person, they see about 10 people in person. Now they'll see up to 100 tapes, 50 to 100 seems to be kind of a going number, is that they can watch the very first little bit and they can be like, does this work grab us in an interesting way? Does this person look like they're a good fit for this role? And they can sort of skim through and then kind of only watch in detail the ones that kind of fit that initial skim. Seems to be that that's happening more and more. Certainly, especially in Vancouver, BC, Canada, which is where I'm based, you got some casting directors who are very polite. And they're like, no, we watch every one front to back. But do they really? If they're getting 100 for every single role, are they really going to watch every tape all the way through? So my professional opinion is that those first opening seconds matter so much. Now, Natalya thankfully also sent the script so that we can take a look at this. And so hopefully this will give you some context for my notes. So we've got Mrs. Borkman is one of the most complicated characters in this film. She's very quirky and openly expresses a desire for money. Her mood changes rapidly. Okay, it's based on an Ibsen play, right? So Mrs. Borkman, coldly and sharply. Details, details, details. Suddenly, with a piercing shriek, Earhart, don't leave me. She rushes with outstretched arms at the door, barring the way, in fear and agitation, right? So we've got a lot of notes from the writer, and the writer probably thinks they're being very helpful, saying like, feel like this. Some of that's a trap for the actor, right? Because you definitely don't want to put on a result, like I said before, if it's wildly expressive, but it looks like you're trying, and we can see that you're trying to feel, then it triggers our like basic human, like, whoa, wait, what is Christina trying to get me to think she's feeling? Because like, I don't trust that. But so you do have to do a certain amount of like, okay, here's the result, here's the feeling, but now I have to find it in an authentic way, because otherwise I'm going to trigger people's like absolutely basic, I don't trust this impulse. What I would say, Natalya, because I know Natalya also like watches the recordings pretty religiously, because she's almost always in a time zone that doesn't allow her to join in person, is that this tape that you've sent is just too neutral off the top. That they've written the character as like quirky. The writer's giving you these notes that make the character seem very volatile. Like she changes, she loves him, she hates him. Even down to the behavior of like running to the door. Now, can you do that when you've only got this much space? Yeah, you can take a step, and that can be your running over to the door. And I think that behavior helps you tell some of that story. And so this tape, for me, comes across as this like contained, cold, neutral, which was kind of in line with what the writer gave you for the very first line, but they also gave you all this information that they wanted it to change. So this is one of those places where I think that it would have been useful potentially, and if you still have the opportunity to tape this again before it gets submitted, I think it might be useful to play with taking more risks and to play with more of those changes in a way that fits you and like showcases who you are. Because back to something that I said in a lesson several weeks ago that I got from my talent agent, and I think is probably more broadly applicable, is that particularly now with increased tapes, but also just the market is changing somewhat, that now there's more focus on uniqueness. There's more focus with casting on like, okay, your unique flavor of you, and not just like we want somebody to match, whatever we like was hot last year, or whatever like American star, is, blowing up on Instagram right now. Right now they're like, okay, no, what makes Christina uniquely Christina, and like that could potentially be the selling feature. And so finding something, that is like a good fit for you in that, and playing with taking more risks with the changes, I think probably is a good idea, especially off the very top of the scene where you want to grab people's attention, and show them like, not only am I good at telling stories, but here's the kind of story that I want to tell with this character. Because ultimately, you ideally want to go in and collaborate. You want to go in and say, okay, director, you're the professional storyteller and you're in charge of the whole story, but I'm in charge of my character, right? Like, and I'm bringing my life to it, and so let's collaborate on that, right? I'm the actor over here, you're the director here, but this is still a collaboration, even if the director has a lot more experience. And highly recommend, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch the interview with Patrick Sabongi, very skilled actor, very skilled teacher, who ended up taking on the acting program and heading up the acting program at Brooklyn College, New York, I think. In just last year, he transitioned into that role of leading that acting program. And what he has to say, I think he said it much more articulately than me. And if I was smart, I would just have like 30-second clip queued up so that every time this kind of thing comes up, I could go like, "Kaha, Patrick Sabongi, get him to say it. Don't just look at me." Let's look at Alex's tape before we wrap for today. Okay, right, 58 seconds.
They all say money make the world go round. Well, my question is, which dollar bill is the most important one? 100? 50? I think it's $1. Why? Because it's so small. What can you buy with $1? A loaf of bread? A candy bar? You see, you're not paying attention to $1. But when you steal $1 from 50,000 people at the same time, you become one of the most wanted criminals in the world. So my question for you, detective, is, if I'm going to share my story with you, are you going to share your dollar with me?
Now, look what a difference it makes when he takes his sunglasses off. So even if, and I don't know, Alex, if this was written for somebody with sunglasses, like it might say, must wear sunglasses, or like he's wearing sunglasses, and like it might be that what you chose there was in the stage direction. But I think that it is so important to see your eyes, and it's so important to see your eyes right away. Honestly, I think that somebody watching this would not stick with it long enough to get to the point where you take your sunglasses off, right? Which is 46 seconds in. Because without seeing your eyes, it's just hard to get a sense of who you are as a person and the choices you're making. There's lots of these little micro muscles. There's all these little micro expressions that are so, so crucial in terms of telling story. So that's, so my top level, is that like if you want to start with the glasses, then the first thing you should do, or if you're retaping this, the very first thing you should do is take them off, right? So start with them. So like, or lose the sunglasses entirely and see if you can find something else that like gives you that flavor of it. Like, what do the sunglasses do for you? And is there something else that will do that for you that isn't the sunglasses? Does that make sense? So that's just like a pure technical thing. If we go back and look at it from a technical aspect, look at this, right? He's in the middle, he's got a neutral background, he's horizontal, really nice light reflecting his eyes. His audios are like a little bit echoey, but that's just something that we don't have control over a lot of the time, right? You could play with, Alex, placing your device closer to you, or if sometimes, and I know it's weird, but sometimes you can take a blanket and like drape it over something that's like off camera. I know an actor who built like a fantastic voice recording studio in her closet by just like draping blankets around the closet and just like hiding in her closet surrounded by blankets. And she's booked quite a number of like professional voiceover gigs from tapes that she made in her blanket shrouded closet. Like nobody has to see what it looks like except for what's behind the camera. But technically, a great setup in terms of like making you look good, showcasing you. And then acting wise, I would say that those little micro hesitations, where you're coming in with that goal of, I'm just talking, right? Like I'm just talking like a real person, and it's hard because I can't see your eyes, so I might be misinterpreting. But it does look like a couple of times in the early part of that monologue, there's this, oh yeah, that's my line. That as an acting teacher, I recognize that those are enough for me to go, oh, okay, this guy's just new. And it's not, if they're casting for a small role, if you look perfectly perfect for it, will it necessarily invalidate you from it? No, of course not. But I noticed, and anybody who watches a lot of tapes will notice. And so if there are those pauses, then they have to be loaded with something, they have to be full of something that make it alive and interesting. Otherwise, the risk is that somebody watching is like, oh, okay, oh, this is just an actor who's like still working out some of the basic technical piece of being able to deliver a minute worth of dialogue, and still thinking about what to say. And if that's still where you're at, and like, again, I don't know, I might be guessing wrong, but if that's still where you're at, one of the best ways I know to address that is to do something physical while you run the lines. Basically, get your heart rate up and do something that requires a little bit of you paying attention to something else while you're in the lines. Go do yoga, go to the gym, run your lines, while you're, like out for a run, run your lines while you're like washing dishes at home, something that just requires a little bit more of your brain. Because then if you do that when either you're slightly distracted or have your heart rate up or both, then when you get onto camera and you get excited because the camera's looking at you, you'll probably still be able to remember the lines because you're basically in the same physical state when you're recording as when you're rehearsing. And I think the mistake a lot of actors make, is they rehearse when they are just like totally chill and calm, and then they get excited when they're acting, and the lines will completely go away, but there's those little hiccups that can happen. I certainly noticed that they still happen for me in auditions, and every time I'm like, damn it, I teach this, I know better. Like, I just, all it would have taken is like 20 extra minutes of running around outside and balancing on things and jumping on. Like, for me personally, I just got to go like walk around and like jump on playground equipment, or like, walk on logs or whatever, just like a little bit of balancing, or, a little bit of like walking in the woods, and doing something physical with my body while I run the lines. That shows me those spots where I'm like, before I'm in front of the camera. And so that's I think the next step that I would recommend. So it's technical, and then just like that extra piece of like totally inconvenient, like locking the lines down so that you can really play with them. And then once you can play with them, that's when you're going to want to think about, okay, those descriptive words for the character, right? Like, who does the character think they are? Like, what's the story from their perspective? What do they want from the other person? So you're really shaping that arc. Because the other thing, sort of top level, is that once you take your glasses off, I'm like, oh, there's some mischief there. Like, I see who this guy is, and I'm like, he's playful, and like, now I see enough of you to like really like you. Just listening to your voice, it's kind of all there. Right, there's a little bit of change at the end, but if I'm a professional and I'm assessing this and I'm watching it, I'm not going to I'm not going to watch 46 seconds of it until I both see your eyes and hear you kind of like start to make that choice about like what you want from the detective. Before that, you're telling this story. I don't know why you're telling it. I don't know if you have a strong opinion about the things you're telling about it. I don't know if you have a personal relationship to like $1, right? It just seems like facts. And so that's a place where you could potentially play in, and again, just like, experiment, take slightly bigger risks. Does that make sense, Alex? And I don't mean to overwhelm you with details. Like, I know this is your first time here, and I want to give you the caveat that we've actually had tapes here in class that I reviewed much more harshly than that. Then the person came back and said, yeah, I booked that one. Going to a professional and saying, hey, what could be better about this? There's always going to be things that could be better about it, because they're not paying you. You don't have a professional setup. They're not giving you like weeks and weeks to prepare. Like, auditions are always like, here's the best I can do, with the time and the energy that I've got. So hopefully here's all the ways that I can think of that might make it better. And you're going to just have to decide which ones of those actually help, and pick one or two to play with. But that just does not have to be perfect for you to get a call back. It does not have to be perfect for you to book it by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. Any questions from you, Alex, before we wrap today?
Just one question. How far in terms of props can we go in the self-tape?
If the prop is taking focus instead of you, it's too far. Right? It's not about the props. Right? Like, they have a professional props department, like that's somebody's entire job. It's not your job, right? Like, for the audition, it should be about the acting. And so if a prop improves your performance, it makes you feel better in some way, and it doesn't distract visually, you're fine. Right? So if you have amazing props and they're down here where the camera can't see them, great. If it's something that's going to come into camera, keep it real simple, right? A pen, a jacket, like a piece of paper, but if it's something that somebody's going to stop looking at you and all of those little micro expressions on your face, and instead they're going to look at the like cool sparkly thing in your hand, I would say don't use it at all. Right now, with that said, me personally, I love using props, right? But I'll often keep it up just off camera. Right? Like, if I'm playing a teacher, I get asked to audition for like teachers, doctors, scientists. Like this is my jam. And so I will often have like a pen or a clipboard, or something, and I'll just keep it down here, because that helps me to be like, yeah, I'm a doctor. I've got a clipboard. Nobody's ever going to see it, but holding a real thing for me is just more grounding and makes me feel more like the character than not holding a real thing. Yeah. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much for your interest in professional acting. I wish you all the best, and I will be back here next week at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time This is Michael Bean for My Free Acting Class, and I hope to see you again. Bye, everybody.
Bye.